Welcome to True Echo, where real stories echo louder than fiction. Today's tale is one of quiet injustice, hidden power, and bold transformation. When a black CEO is told to wait outside by the very staff of the airline he built from nothing, what happens next will redefine everything they thought they knew. Get ready for a journey of exposure, courage, and a boardroom reckoning that stuns everyone in the aviation world. The woman behind the desk didn't raise her voice. In fact, her tone was polite, almost cordial, as she looked at the man standing in front of her. "I'm sorry, sir, but you don't meet the criteria for the first-class lounge." To anyone else in the terminal that day, the man may have looked like just another tired traveler. His shirt was lightly wrinkled from hours of travel. A pair of plain glasses sat on the bridge of his nose, and a worn leather backpack clung to his shoulder like an afterthought. No luxury watch, no polished shoes. No clear markers of power or wealth. But that man was Marcus Blake. 47 years old. Harvard graduate. Entrepreneur. Visionary. And most importantly, founder and CEO of Skybridge Airlines, the very company whose logo adorned the lounge he'd just been denied entry to. He didn't argue. Didn't raise a brow. Just quietly nodded and stepped aside, letting a younger white man in an immaculate suit pass through the lounge doors with ease. "Mr. Cole, welcome back." "Scotch as always," the same attendant chirped. Her face lit up like stage lights. Marcus said nothing. But inside, his pride throbbed with the dull ache of familiarity. This wasn't the first time. In fact, it was the 23rd time in 10 days. Marcus hadn't been traveling for leisure. He was on a mission, a quiet, personal audit. For 2 weeks, he'd booked his own tickets under a pseudonym. No first-class tags. No CEO privileges. No luxury accommodations. Just him, an alias, Jim Carter, and a simple goal. Find out whether the culture he built was still alive, or quietly dying. What he discovered was worse than he imagined. Each insult was subtle, but no less sharp. In Boston, an elderly black man was made to show multiple IDs while a well-dressed white woman breezed past security with just a nod. In Denver, a business-class couple in track pants were asked to reconfirm their upgrades while a younger white man in designer clothes was greeted with champagne. In LAX, a seasoned Diamond member was told, "We need to verify your status," only to watch a white tech bro be welcomed with fanfare. And now, Atlanta. His hometown. It wasn't just prejudice. It was systemic. Marcus sat down in the public seating area, pulled out his battered notebook, and began writing. Day 10. ATL to LAX. Lounge access denied despite valid credentials. Staff, Sarah Jennings. White male passenger, Richard Cole. No checks performed. He leaned back, staring at the ceiling. He'd built Skybridge to be different. Not just more efficient, or more luxurious, but more human. Fairer. It had taken 15 years, thousands of hours, millions of dollars, and a deep personal wound he rarely talked about. As a young man, Marcus had been denied boarding on a flight simply because the gate agent didn't believe he could afford it. The humiliation stayed with him. It became his drive, his fire. When he built Skybridge Airlines, it was supposed to be the antithesis of every place that had once made him feel small. But now it seemed that the very culture he tried to protect had become a mask, hiding the same bias he once vowed to defeat. He flipped to another page in the notebook and reviewed his notes. Each entry was a stab wound. Not because he was surprised, but because he'd always hoped he was wrong. He wasn't. He was living proof. Marcus Blake boarded the plane from Atlanta to Los Angeles without a word. His ticket, purchased anonymously, put him in the back of economy, near the lavatories. It was deliberate. He didn't want special treatment. He wanted the truth. As he settled into his narrow seat, he pulled the notebook from his jacket once more. The pages now curled slightly from overuse, filled with the names of attendants, gate agents, lounges, and details that painted a chilling picture. He flipped to his most recent entry, Sarah Jennings, ATL Lounge. Richard Cole admitted without verification. Black passengers consistently rechecked or denied. Just then, a soft thud nearby drew his attention. An elderly black woman across the aisle struggled to lift her rolling carry-on into the overhead bin. Her face was drawn with embarrassment, her thin arms shaking under the weight. Marcus instinctively rose halfway to help her, but paused when he spotted a uniformed attendant headed her way. Chris Doyle, early 30s, clean-shaven, professional. Marcus had seen him before. Relief crossed the elderly woman's face, briefly, until Chris offered only a fleeting glance before walking past her without pause. She blinked in confusion. He'd simply ignored her. Moments later, Chris returned, but not for her. Instead, he smiled warmly at a younger white man in row 12B and offered to store his luggage and bring him a pillow. Marcus clenched his jaw. Same crew. Same flight. Different standards. He looked back at the woman, who now stood frozen and quietly pushed her bag into the bin with difficulty. Her eyes met his for a second, shame, apology, and defeat all bundled together. Marcus stood and helped her without a word. The gratitude on her face cut deeper than any insult. "Thank you, young man," she whispered. "It's no trouble," he replied softly. "But it should have been someone else helping you first." He returned to his seat, flipping open the notebook again. Chris Doyle. Ignored elderly black woman struggling with luggage. Offered full assistance to white passenger 12B. He closed the book and stared at the seat in front of him, his thoughts heavy. This wasn't a coincidence. Not anymore. He tried to give the benefit of the doubt. Tried to believe it was a few misguided individuals. But the more he saw, the more it became clear, there was something rotten buried deep inside the airline's culture. When the flight landed in LAX and passengers filed out, Marcus lingered at the rear, waiting to speak with the woman one more time. But she was already gone, lost in a sea of travelers. He stepped off the plane with a renewed sense of urgency. He had more than enough evidence to act. But something inside him told him there was still more to uncover, something hidden. At the Skybridge first-class lounge in LAX, Marcus approached the front desk once again. This time, the receptionist was a young woman with straight blonde hair and a polished name tag, Ashley Porter. She glanced up from her computer and paused, her eyes quickly scanning Marcus from head to toe. Her smile was tight. "Good afternoon, sir," she said. "May I please verify your membership?" Marcus handed over his first-class member card, the same card that had opened every door for over a decade. Ashley scanned it, frowned slightly, and began typing. "This is just a routine check, Mr. Carter. I hope you understand." Before Marcus could respond, another passenger approached the counter, tall, white, expensive-looking suit. His face all too familiar. Richard Cole. Ashley's demeanor transformed instantly. "Mr. Cole," she exclaimed, her smile brightening. "Welcome back. Your favorite scotch is already waiting. Seat 1A, as always." Marcus watched the interaction in silence, rage simmering beneath his calm exterior. He had once shaken Richard Cole's hand at an industry conference. A venture capitalist with stakes in multiple airline vendors. Privileged, arrogant, and now unknowingly complicit in exposing one of Skybridge's darkest flaws. Ashley turned back to Marcus with a forced smile. "Your verification is taking a bit longer than usual. Feel free to wait over there." Marcus didn't argue. He simply nodded and stepped aside. As he sat outside the lounge, notebook in hand, his heart beat faster, not just from anger, but from resolve. Ashley Porter. Re-verified black passenger, me. White passenger Richard Cole greeted without question. Evidence consistent with Atlanta lounge treatment. He paused, gripping the notebook tightly. That made 5 employees. 5 names. 5 patterns. One unmistakable truth. He wasn't being paranoid. He was being proven right. And then, his phone buzzed. A message from Elaine Barrett, his longtime COO and closest confidant. Elaine, Marcus. You need to see the internal brand guidelines Thomas Reed approved last quarter. Sending now. He opened the PDF file. The document was sterile. Corporate. Dozens of pages detailing Skybridge's brand standard protocols for premium service optimization. But between the bland jargon, Marcus saw it clearly. Prioritize premium image clientele. Minimize secondary support to low representation passengers. Gate agents and attendants must apply discretion when evaluating non-premium travelers. Every phrase was coded. Every word dripped with veiled prejudice. He scrolled to the bottom. Authorized by Thomas Reed, Regional Senior Manager, Southeast Division. Marcus's vision narrowed. This wasn't rogue behavior. This was a hidden system. He flipped back through his notes and suddenly, everything fit. Sarah Jennings. Kevin Rowe. Diane Walker. Ashley Porter. And now, Thomas Reed. The dots connected. The gatekeepers weren't just acting out of unconscious bias. They were following orders. He stared out the lounge window at the tarmac beyond, heart pounding. The next flight would take him back to where it all began, Skybridge headquarters. He would confront Thomas Reed. He would expose everything. And he would tear this rot out by the roots. The plane descended into New York with a slow, smooth glide, but inside Marcus Blake, the storm had already begun. As he stepped off the aircraft at JFK, a cold wind greeted him, brushing against his blazer as if to warn, this won't be easy. But Marcus wasn't looking for ease. He wanted justice. What he'd uncovered wasn't just bias. It was betrayal, of his values, of his customers, of the very promise Skybridge Airlines was built on. A town car waited outside the terminal to take him to Skybridge headquarters in Midtown Manhattan. It was a quiet ride, but not a peaceful one. The closer they got to the glass and steel tower that bore the airline's soaring logo, the more his thoughts raced. He flipped open the notebook once more. It was swollen now, nearly full. The entries detailed a rot that had infected everything, from check-in counters to flight cabins to lounges. All signed off and supervised by one man. Thomas Reed. Reed wasn't just a name on a report anymore. He was the architect of this silent discrimination, a regional manager with enough influence to enforce policies disguised as branding, and enough cunning to avoid detection. Until now. As Marcus stepped into the skyscraper lobby, the staff gave courteous nods, unaware of the fury simmering just beneath their CEO's calm expression. Elaine Barrett was waiting for him in the executive elevator. She looked up from her tablet, worry lining her face. "I've assembled everyone you asked," she said in a low voice. "Reed is already in the conference room. So are Sarah Jennings, Kevin Rowe, Diane Walker, and Ashley Porter." Marcus nodded once. "Security? Already briefed. Quiet and ready." The elevator doors closed, sealing them in steel silence. Elaine glanced at him. "Are you sure you want to do this in front of them all?" Marcus didn't hesitate. "They need to see what they've done. And the rest of the company needs to see what accountability looks like." The elevator chimed, and the doors opened into a sleek hallway that led directly to the boardroom. Through the frosted glass, the silhouettes of the summoned employees were visible, nervous, fidgeting, unaware of what was coming. Marcus entered first. The room fell silent. At the head of the table, Thomas Reed stood and forced a tight smile. "Marcus," he said, extending a hand. "Wasn't expecting you back so soon." Marcus didn't shake it. "I'm sure you weren't," he replied coolly, placing the thick binder on the table like a dropped hammer. I think you know exactly why we're here. Reed's smile faltered, his fingers twitching nervously. Marcus opened the binder. The first page was a printout of the LAX incident, followed by images of chat logs, time-stamped text messages, and photos of each lounge check-in desk. Page after page of entries from Marcus's notebook had been transcribed, verified, and indexed. Then came the emails, the smoking gun. Ashley Porter's lounge recheck. Diane Walker's ignored assistance. Kevin Rowe's delay tactics. All backed by Reed's internal directives. Marcus spoke slowly, his voice a blend of ice and thunder. For 10 days, I flew this airline undercover. No perks. No announcements. Just a black man in coach with a notebook. His gaze locked on Reed. And what I discovered was worse than I imagined. Reed tried to interrupt. Marcus, if I could just. You will not speak, Marcus snapped. Not until you've seen what you built. He clicked the conference screen behind him to life. It displayed the PDF of the brand standards document, and highlighted in red were the phrases, prioritize premium image clientele, limit assistance to low representation passengers, and discreet enforcement to maintain brand identity. You called this strategy. I call it a betrayal. He turned to the others at the table, Jennings, Rowe, Walker, Porter. You followed these directives without question. You looked people like me in the eye and decided we weren't worthy of decency. You didn't just insult your customers, you insulted this company's soul. Silence. Marcus looked at Elaine and nodded. She stepped forward with a second binder, thinner but just as damning. Inside were disciplinary documents, termination letters, and legal disclosures prepared overnight. Effective immediately, Marcus announced, Thomas Reed, you are terminated from Skybridge Airlines. Your access is revoked. You are barred from representing this company in any capacity. Reed's face drained of color. You can't do this. I just did. He turned to the others. Sarah Jennings. Kevin Rowe. Diane Walker. Ashley Porter. You are all suspended pending final investigation. Your behavior will be reviewed by a third-party panel. If it's confirmed that you knowingly participated in or enabled discriminatory service, your employment will be permanently terminated. The room stood still. No protests. No defenses. Only shame. Marcus turned to security, who had been waiting at the door. Escort Mr. Reed out. Reed stood shakily. You're throwing away years of loyalty. I'm cleaning out years of rot. The guards flanked him, and as Reed was led from the room, the others avoided eye contact, their faces pale and stunned. As the door closed, Marcus exhaled for the first time in hours. He turned to Elaine. Set a full leadership meeting. Noon. Every executive. Every department head. They need to hear everything. She nodded. Already in motion. As they exited the room, Marcus knew this wasn't the end. This was the reckoning before the rebuild. But for the first time in weeks, he didn't feel powerless. He felt ready. At precisely noon, the main auditorium at Skybridge Airlines headquarters was packed. Rows of employees sat shoulder to shoulder, murmurs spreading like static through the space. The room buzzed with rumors. Some had heard whispers of a major firing, others speculated about policy changes. But no one, not even the senior staff, truly understood the storm that had just passed through the boardroom above. Until Marcus Blake walked onto the stage. There was no mic check. No announcement. He simply stepped forward, tall, steady, and unmistakably focused. His tailored suit was pressed, but his face told a different story. Not polished. Not rehearsed. Just real. The kind of real that silenced even the most distracted employees. Good afternoon, Marcus began, his voice clear, resonating across the auditorium. I stand before you today, not just as your CEO, but as someone who was once a young man denied dignity because of how I looked. The room froze. I've been insulted. Rejected. Judged because of my skin color and my appearance. And I swore that when I built Skybridge Airlines, it would stand for something better. That we would serve every person who walked through our gates with fairness, dignity, and respect. He paused, letting that memory settle into the hearts of his listeners. But I've recently discovered, we've failed. Gasps rippled. Marcus nodded, letting the words hang. For the last 10 days, I flew under the name Jim Carter. No private jets. No first-class perks. No press following me. I was just another passenger in coach. I visited our lounges, our check-in counters, our gates. And what I saw, what I documented, shook me to my core. He reached behind him and lifted a small, worn notebook from the podium. This, he said, holding it up, is a journal of quiet discrimination. A record of black and brown passengers turned away, denied assistance, ignored while others were greeted with warmth and grace. Not because of tickets. Not because of flight status. But because they didn't look the part. Several employees shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Others bowed their heads. Let me be absolutely clear, Marcus continued. This was not the failure of a few bad employees. This was systemic. Approved. Directed. By management. He clicked the projector, and the auditorium screen came alive. Emails. Memos. Policies. Staff training guidelines. All designed with coded language to enforce invisible hierarchies based on race, appearance, and class. Innocent words like brand image and priority clientele were used to mask discrimination, Marcus said. Customers were being judged, quietly, cruelly, and methodically. And until now, we didn't just let it happen, we enabled it. He took a breath and leveled his gaze across the silent room. But that ends today. A quiet gasp. Some jaws clenched. Others simply watched, motionless. I have terminated Thomas Reed, regional senior manager and the architect of these policies. 4 other employees involved have been suspended and will face third-party review. The crowd was still. I am not here to punish a few. I am here to transform this entire company. Marcus clicked again. A new slide appeared, the Skybridge Equity Initiative. A bold plan. Immediate mandatory retraining for every employee. Independent audits at every hub. A new ethics committee, co-led by internal and external advisors. Anonymous reporting tools. Transparent discipline policies. But most importantly, every senior executive would undergo a full review of their departments. No more excuses. No more blind eyes, Marcus declared. I don't care how long someone has worked here or how many awards they've won. If they violate our principles, they're gone. Applause started slowly, timid at first. But then it grew, rising into a powerful, cathartic wave. Marcus raised a hand and gestured toward the side of the stage. I'd like to introduce someone very special to me. A former Skybridge executive. A lifelong customer. And someone who has endured the very discrimination we are about to dismantle. David Mitchell stepped into the spotlight. Dressed simply in a sweater and jeans, he carried himself with quiet dignity. His hair was grayer now, but his voice, steady and rich, echoed with the weight of hard-earned truth. I flew over 200 times with this airline, he said. When I wore a suit, I was respected. But once I retired and dressed like a regular man, everything changed. I was questioned. Delayed. Dismissed. He held up his own notebook, smaller than Marcus's, but equally damning. I logged every incident. And for years, I told myself it was just chance. A fluke. But it wasn't. The room was dead silent. I want to thank Marcus for listening. And for acting. This isn't just about me, it's about the elderly woman no one helped. The father traveling with his kids who got overlooked. The young man told, you must be in the wrong line. David turned to Marcus and extended a hand. Marcus shook it, visibly moved. David faced the crowd one final time. Now, we rebuild. The entire auditorium stood, a standing ovation rising like a wave of redemption. Marcus stepped back to the mic. David Mitchell will now join Skybridge's newly formed Customer Equity Council. Together, we're going to rewrite the rules. Not with silence, but with strength. The applause didn't stop for nearly a full minute. And for the first time in a long time, Marcus felt something return to the heart of Skybridge Airlines, its soul. Later that evening, Marcus sat alone in his office, high above the glittering Manhattan skyline. The cheers from the auditorium still echoed faintly in his memory, but they couldn't drown out the gravity of what lay ahead. Accountability was only the beginning. Now came the hard part, rebuilding trust. The room was dim, save for the soft glow of his laptop and the flickering skyline outside. His fingers hovered over the keyboard as he composed the next move, not just for Skybridge, but for the future of ethical service in the airline industry. A knock at the door broke his focus. Elaine Barrett stepped in, her face calm but serious. You should eat, she said gently, placing a plate of food down beside him. You haven't touched anything since noon. Marcus offered a small smile. Thanks, Elaine. I'll get to it. She didn't leave. Instead, she sat across from him, folding her arms. You did something incredible today, Marcus. But we both know this is far from over. He nodded, the lines on his face deepening. There's still fallout coming, he said. Media inquiries, shareholder concerns, maybe even lawsuits from Reed or his allies. But worse than that, there are still people inside this company who think what he did was okay. Who believe in those brand standards. Elaine leaned forward. Then we keep pushing. And we bring in the right people to replace them. Marcus paused, then opened a folder labeled Phase 2 on his screen. Starting tomorrow, we begin silent reviews of all regional branches. HR, customer service, crew management, everything. We'll create a confidential review board. Every employee can report what they've seen without fear of retaliation. Elaine raised an eyebrow. Even managers. Especially managers, Marcus replied. We can't afford blind loyalty anymore. He reached for the remote and switched on the large monitor across the room. A map of the United States lit up, marked with glowing dots, each one representing a Skybridge hub or service partner location. We start here, he said, pointing to 5 blinking cities. Atlanta. Lax. Chicago. Boston. Denver. Every incident I witnessed, every log entry, happened in these regions. Elaine studied the screen, then looked back at Marcus. You sure you don't want to announce this openly? Make it public? He shook his head. Not yet. We need to know who's still protecting that system. Who's lying low, waiting to see if we're serious. If we go loud too soon, they'll cover their tracks. Elaine nodded slowly. You're right. But it's going to take a team. Marcus turned to her, a new fire behind his eyes. Then let's build one. From scratch. I want a diversity task force with real power. Not just a PR stunt. Real authority. Oversight. Accountability. Elaine smiled, and for the first time in days, it wasn't tinged with worry. I've got names. People who've been overlooked, even mistreated themselves. You'd be surprised how many have been waiting for a reason to believe again. Then let's give them that reason. Suddenly, Marcus's phone buzzed. A text notification appeared, unknown number. Thought you should know. Reed wasn't working alone. Check your internal vendor contracts. Some were adjusted under his authority. His heart skipped. Marcus replied instantly. "Who is this?" No response. He turned to Elaine, now reading over his shoulder. "You think it's legit?" she asked. Marcus didn't answer. He already knew. Reed hadn't just pushed internal bias, he'd manipulated external partnerships to reflect the same elitist values. "I want a full audit of vendor agreements signed under Reed's leadership," he ordered. Marketing firms. Catering companies. Lounge subcontractors. If he extended this discrimination outside the company, we'll find it. Elaine was already typing the request. "You realize, Marcus, this might mean ending contracts with companies we've worked with for years." Marcus stared out the window at the skyline. "Then we end them. Loyalty without integrity is just corruption." The next morning, the audit began. Elaine assembled a special internal task force composed of employees who had previously filed discrimination concerns, many of which had been dismissed or buried. Now, they had the power to expose the truth they once feared to voice. Among them was Aisha Grant, a junior HR representative from Chicago who had submitted multiple complaints about her regional manager's appearance bias when selecting which employees were allowed to greet VIPs. Also on the team was Luis Herrera, a baggage supervisor from Miami who'd long noticed that certain passengers, especially elderly Black or Latino customers, were routinely marked as "flag for verification" in their files, often with no justification. Marcus invited each of them to a private video conference, looked them in the eye, and said the same words. "I didn't listen before. That was my failure. But I hear you now. And I need your help." And they answered. Emails poured in. Hidden logs were recovered. Whistleblowers came forward, some with shaking hands, others with fire in their eyes. By day 3, the internal investigation had expanded across 5 departments. Vendor audits revealed several third-party companies using unofficial appearance-based screening guides for customer-facing services, guides directly linked to Reed's original policy language. Some vendors denied it. Others quietly withdrew. Marcus didn't wait. He issued an internal bulletin titled, "No Deal Without Dignity." It outlined Skybridge's immediate termination of contracts with any partner organization found engaging in discriminatory practices. Shareholders raised concerns, but customers rallied. Letters, tweets, video testimonials began to flood Skybridge's channels. One read, "I've flown with Skybridge for years and always loved your service. But I never knew people like my mother were being treated differently. Thank you, Mr. Blake, for fighting for us." Another said, "My father used to say, airports reveal who people really are. You just proved him right and wrong. Thank you for changing the game." Marcus read every message. Every line. Because in each one, he saw not just gratitude, but expectation. He couldn't fail them again. By the end of the week, the atmosphere at Skybridge Airlines had changed entirely. Employees who had once whispered their concerns now stood taller. Lounge attendants, gate agents, cabin crew, they were all beginning to realize, the age of silent tolerance was over. Marcus Blake had ignited a transformation. But change, real change, always meets resistance. That resistance arrived late Thursday afternoon, in the form of a letter slid under Marcus's office door. No name. No envelope. Just one page. Printed in bold letters. Skybridge is a premium airline. Not a bus line. Don't dilute what we built. If you keep tearing down standards, you'll lose the customers that matter. Marcus stared at the paper for a long time. It wasn't just a threat. It was a declaration, from someone within. Someone with power. He handed it to Elaine, who read it in silence. "It's not Reed," she said eventually. "This came from someone else. Someone still inside the inner circle." Marcus nodded grimly. "And whoever it is, they're not done." That evening, he met privately with the new Customer Equity Council, which now included David Mitchell and 6 other vetted members, diverse in age, race, and background, each with personal stories of bias in air travel. Marcus stood before them, holding nothing back. We've rooted out the first layer. But the deeper rot is cultural. Subtle. Insidious. Luis Herrera, the Miami supervisor, leaned forward. Then we start with hiring. And promotion, added Aisha Grant. The people who get promoted are the ones already in the system. It just repeats the cycle. David Mitchell nodded. If you want fairness, you have to build it from the ground up. Diversity isn't just faces. It's mindset. Marcus tapped the table. Agreed. So here's what we do next. Over the next hour, they outlined Phase 3. A full audit of Skybridge's hiring and promotion practices. Bias training that didn't just check a box, but included scenario-based accountability. A new hiring requirement: all final candidate selections for leadership positions would go through an equity review panel. And finally, perhaps most controversially, the public release of Marcus's Undercover journal. We redact personal names and secure legal clearance, Marcus said. But the public deserves to know what I saw. And more importantly, that we're doing something about it. The council hesitated. David looked at him. You're risking everything. Marcus met his gaze. Then it's the right risk. 2 days later, the Blake report went live. In a single press conference streamed from Skybridge's Manhattan headquarters, Marcus stood before the media and laid it all bare. He described his undercover flights. The discrimination he saw. The shame he felt building a company that had allowed it. And the changes now underway. Reporters asked tough questions. One asked, "Are you admitting your leadership allowed systemic racism?" Marcus replied without blinking, "Yes. And I take full responsibility. That's why I chose to face it firsthand, and why I'm choosing to fix it, publicly." Another asked, "Won't this damage the brand?" Marcus answered, "Covering it up would have done far worse." The next morning, headlines hit every major outlet. Skybridge CEO goes undercover, exposes airline discrimination. Marcus Blake's 10-day mission sparks industry reckoning. From first class to coach, one CEO's journey to justice. Customer response was immediate and powerful. Within 72 hours, Skybridge saw a surge in bookings. Not from wealthy elites, but from working-class travelers, Black families, first-time flyers. Marcus's inbox flooded with letters. One from a young woman in Baltimore read, "My mom was a cleaner. We never flew because she didn't think people like us belonged on planes. But next month, we're flying together for the first time. With Skybridge." That one made Marcus pause. He printed it and pinned it above his desk. But inside the company, not all was calm. One regional executive resigned in protest, accusing Marcus of corporate martyrdom. A few managers sent passive-aggressive emails filled with buzzwords like customer stratification and operational integrity. Marcus welcomed it. "Let them show themselves," he told Elaine. "Then we'll clean house." And they did. 2 more directors were quietly removed after the audit uncovered attempts to obstruct council investigations. Replacements were brought in, leaders with proven track records in inclusion, empathy, and real customer service. Among them, Aisha Grant, now promoted to Director of People Operations in Chicago. Luis Herrera, tapped to lead customer experience training for the Southeast region. And David Mitchell, now serving as special advisor to the CEO on ethics and fairness. It wasn't just a new leadership structure. It was a new era. 1 week after the press conference, Marcus walked through JFK's Terminal C, the same terminal where, years ago, a young black man had been denied boarding. Now, he walked alongside that memory like an old shadow. No longer trying to outrun it, but carrying it with purpose. He approached the Skybridge first-class lounge. The staff didn't flinch or second-guess. No re-verification. No questions. Just a warm voice from a young receptionist. "Welcome, Mr. Blake. It's good to see you again." He paused, smiled, and replied, "It's good to be seen." As he sat down inside the lounge, sipping his coffee, Marcus opened his notebook one last time. On the final page, he wrote. Day 17. Terminal C. No rejection. No resistance. Just respect. The work isn't finished, but the change is real. He closed the notebook, placed it beside him, and gazed out at the tarmac. For the first time in a long time, Marcus Blake wasn't flying undercover. He was flying free. 2 months later, Marcus Blake stood in front of a massive screen at the Skybridge Global Leadership Summit. The event, held in a high-tech auditorium in San Francisco, wasn't just for show, it was for legacy. On screen behind him, the words, "From bystanders to builders," glowed in gold. The crowd was made up of nearly 700 Skybridge executives, staff, flight crews, and partners. But this wasn't just a presentation. It was the official relaunch of Skybridge's global values, and a milestone in one of the most radical corporate overhauls aviation had ever seen. Marcus took the mic, but not before glancing at the first row. There sat David Mitchell, now a national speaker on equity in service. Aisha Grant, running training programs across 12 hubs. Luis Herrera, still in his uniform, having flown in that morning after helping a disabled passenger find her missing bag personally. These were not tokens. These were architects of a new foundation. Marcus spoke. 2 months ago, I sat in this same position, invisible in my own house. Denied, dismissed, and overlooked. But I wasn't angry that they didn't know who I was. I was devastated because they didn't care who anyone was, unless they fit a certain mold. He clicked the remote. A slide popped up with the title, "Bias Isn't Just Loud. It's Designed That Way." What I found wasn't one bad actor. It was a system of quiet standards, inherited and unchecked. A whisper network of exclusion that rewarded familiarity and punished difference. He paused. The room was dead silent. I didn't go undercover to catch people. I went to remember why I started this company in the first place. And I remembered, I built Skybridge for people who were tired of being told they were too much, or not enough. For the ones told to wait outside. He pressed another button. The screen now read. The Skybridge Promise. No customer will be evaluated by appearance, attire, accent, or background. Every employee has the right to report discrimination without fear. Internal advancement will reflect real performance, not favoritism. No vendor or partner will stay in business with us unless they reflect these values. Transparency reports will be released quarterly to the public. Marcus looked across the room, locking eyes with team leaders and crew alike. This isn't just a policy. It's a pledge. If it costs us money, so be it. If it costs us prestige, fine. But what we gain will always be worth more. As the crowd stood in applause, several employees wept quietly, some from vindication, others from the sheer relief of being seen. 3 days later, the New York Times published a headline. He was told to wait outside. Now he's rewriting corporate America. Media attention exploded again, but this time, it wasn't just the press watching. CEOs from other major industries reached out. Airlines. Hospitality. Healthcare. Education. One message, from the CEO of a global hotel chain, read. We'd like to learn from what you did. Our house needs cleaning too. Skybridge's internal training program, Clear Skies, went open source. Thousands downloaded it. Dozens adopted it. Meanwhile, Marcus continued his quiet leadership, visiting small hubs, checking terminals himself, still traveling under aliases to ensure that change was not cosmetic, but cultural. He wasn't after praise. He was after permanence. In one particularly touching moment, he received a letter from an 11-year-old girl in Mississippi. "Mr. Blake, my dad said you made it so people who look like us get to fly and be treated nice. When I grow up, I want to work for your airline." Marcus smiled and wrote back, "When you're ready, Skybridge will be ready for you." On the anniversary of his undercover journey, Marcus hosted a small gathering in the same Atlanta terminal where it all began. No cameras. No suits. Just him, a handful of employees, and one elderly couple from Alabama who had once been ignored at the gate. Marcus had tracked them down through one of his audit notes. This time, they were invited personally by the CEO. They walked through the lounge without hesitation. Greeted by name. Seated like royalty. Served with care. The husband leaned over and said, "We've flown a long time, son. But this feels like the first time we've really flown." Marcus simply replied, "That's how it should have always been." As the sun set beyond the runway, casting a golden hue over the tarmac, Marcus stood watching a Skybridge jet take off, its engines roaring, its nose lifting toward the sky. No longer weighed down by hidden shame. No longer shadowed by silent bias. But soaring, clear, honest, and free. And so was he. At its heart, this story reminds us that leadership is not just about power, it's about purpose. Marcus Blake didn't retaliate with ego, he responded with vision. He proved that integrity and accountability can reshape entire industries when paired with courage. Sometimes the only way to fix a broken system is to walk through it, unseen, unheard, and rebuild it from the inside. If you believe more leaders need to take a stand like Marcus did, share this story. Don't forget to subscribe for more powerful true stories, and let us know in the comments, what would you have done in his shoes?